think Liverpool University chose me rather than me choosing Liverpool in some ways. And I mean that in that when you choose law, it's one of those subjects that pretty much every university offers. So you start to think, well, what is it about the particular course, or am I going to choose it based on location? And I chose Liverpool based on both the quality of the course, but also how friendly and at home I felt when I came to visit. And that was really one of the determining factors. And it's something that I do a lot in my life. So it's that you arrive somewhere and how I'm made to feel is really important to me. I knew of Liverpool. So I'm from East London. I grew up in East London. My parents have Caribbean heritage. I was the first in our family to go to university. So I didn't know much about what university life would be like. And so there were two other factors that were important, which might surprise you. One was I liked watching a programme in the 80s called Brookside, and it was brilliant and it was fun. It made me feel as if I knew the area. And the second was that my mother who was a microbiologist, had done a course and had stayed in the halls of residence, I think the year before, and had come back saying what a wonderful time she'd had and what a lovely city it was. So I had good connotations, the course seemed good, and then I got there and I felt great. My expectations of Liverpool were probably a bit naive. I assumed all big cities were similar to London. I don't think I really appreciated how massive London is. And so Liverpool felt smaller and cosier than I was expecting. And one of the things that I was surprised about was the diversity mix. I know it is one of the oldest cities that's had a black population for a long time, and its history, from years ago with the Atlantic trade, and black people have settled in the area for a long time. But the way that played out in the way the city dynamics was new to me. It was a diverse city, but I didn't feel it was as integrated as I expected. And that was notable with the university when I went to Freshers Week and went around all the hundreds of different organisations, and there wasn't an African Caribbean society, or Afro-Caribbean society as we called it then. And that was important to me. Where I'd grown up in East London, it was a very, very diverse mix of people from all over the world. So I had been very used to that. And on my law course at university, as I recall, of about 200 university students, 4 of us were black, and that shocked me. And I was the only one of those students who had done her A-levels, was 18 and decided to go to uni. So it was mainly a lot of international students. So it was surprising, but my philosophy and ethos is, if there's something that's missing, then create it. I set up the African Caribbean Society. So I had the opportunity to immerse myself in the community. And one of the highlights from that, in fact, big highlight, was I got to meet John Barnes, who, if you don't know, you should know, a famous Liverpool football player at the time. And he would just be out being in Liverpool, as you would do, because he lived there. And as part of a fundraising activity we were doing for the African Caribbean Society, I approached him when I saw him in this bar. I kept seeing him and I thought, I'll just go and ask him if he would be willing to donate something and even appear at this event. And he was so nice, so welcoming, said yes, and turned up and did what he said he was going to do. And that kind of epitomised everything that I experienced about the local community in Liverpool, and was definitely a highlight. I loved family law, which was one of the subjects I was studying that year. So that was great. Absolutely loved it. And I can't for the life of me remember her name, but the dean of the faculty at that time was a professor in family, and she was amazing. So being in her classes, having her tutorship and immersing myself in that gave me something where I thought, well, I like this. Can't stand everything else, but I like this. How can I do this? So I focused on that. And then I knew that I liked performing. I was a dancer before I got to uni, studied dance for a long time. I thought, intellectual property law, that's about creativity. That was my naive thought process. So I knew I could do that in the third year. So those two things were what I decided to focus on. What do I love? How can I do more of it? I came back to London to study and to work, and I went to work for Charles Russell, a traditional law firm. Wonderful training and a partnership that the diversity this time was different because it was 99% male, 95% male, middle-aged white. There weren't many female leaders, and the ones who were there, the 5, only 1 had children. And so as a young lawyer looking ahead to where I thought my career might go, I didn't think the structure would support the life I thought I wanted, which I thought I'm going to want a family at some point. And I don't see how that will work here. And I'm not sure I want to be the one having to make the changes. I think the remnants of how I felt at university, being surrounded by lawyers, lovely though they are, doesn't feel very diverse. I kind of like being around different people, creatives. So I decided after qualifying to look for a way that I could be around much more diversity. And it turns out being an in-house lawyer, so working for a company rather than for a law firm, would offer me all of that. And Sky also managed to bring in my love of media. At this stage, I'd dropped my love of family law, but I'd made that decision. But I'd had the opportunity to explore both, and I'd realised I was leaning more towards the media. Whilst at Charles Russell, I was a co-founder of a dance group called Impact's Dance Foundation, which is still going, and that focused on helping young people aged 11 to 18 who like street dance have wider experiences of dance and do professional performances. So we fundraised, we ran classes, it was brilliant. So I always had performing, so in my mind I was happy with my legal career, and I would always do that as something additional, and it balanced me out. I was very happy. Joining Sky worked, it ticked all of the boxes that I had. So the diversity, the media, it was fast-paced, it was entrepreneurial. It was, at that point, back in 2001, still quite a youngish business. So things moved quickly, and there was a lot of opportunity to be nosy and get involved in everything. So at that point, I thought I would have a career there as a lawyer for quite a while. But one of the reasons I studied law in the first place is because I saw it as learning a skill set that was flexible, that you could apply to other disciplines, so that I might be a solicitor, I might be a barrister, I could work in a company, I could work elsewhere, and I could take that skill set and do something else. So it had always been in the back of my mind, and a lot of people I admire, like Nelson Mandela, I knew was a lawyer originally and then was an activist and then eventually becomes president. There's lots of people who've got a legal background who then use it in other facets, which I think is wonderful. The transition to TV feels like a happy accident. I think of luck as preparation meeting opportunity. So I'd been preparing all the time because I'd never let go of my performing, and I'd been practicing these skills. And self-development is also really important to me. So I'd gone on a self-development weekend with my best friend, and I'd come away and thought, well, I love my job, I'm happy, what else do I want to do? And I did a one-day television presenting course just for the fun of it in London. And at the end they said, oh, you're quite good at this. This is how you could take it further. And I said, oh no, thank you. This was just for fun. A couple of months later, a competition was launched at Sky called Sky Talent. And literally I walked in and there was a poster on the wall that said, can you cut it? Do you think you could be our next presenting talent? And it was like, well, actually I do. And out of that, I got the opportunity to create a show reel. And as one of the winners, so the winners were voted on by all of our peers across the business. And you got to meet the channel heads, and they offered, if there was a role that you could do, they offered it to you, which was not what I was expecting. They offered me a chance to screen test to become a weather presenter and cover someone on sabbatical. And my first thought was, no, I know nothing about weather, and I really love my legal job. I wasn't planning to leave it or do something else. So the question that I had was, well, what would make this something I'd want to do? Because I really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, if I could not leave legal and still be try out television presenting, that would be fun. but that will never happen. But I did say that out loud to the head of legal, and I got a call that said, we've agreed you can have a secondment and you can do 6 months with the weather department in Sky News. So 6 months TV presenting became a year, and then I was offered a job with the weather department. So I had a decision to make. Did I want to go back to my legal job, or would I want to stay? So the choice at that point was to do one or the other full time. And what I wanted was to do both. So that is what led to me co-founding the law firm Hailbury, which was all about flexibility and lawyers being able to be amazing lawyers and provide that service whilst, if they wanted to, having a second career, or if they wanted to, raising a family or being a carer or just doing something else. There was a period of time when all I did was Hailbury. So I stopped working on television because that required me to travel a lot, and I really wanted to build this business and build my family. So for 9 years I focused on the business and making the most of that, and having a lifestyle while I could raise my young son and work at a high level, and that was beautiful. And then when we sold so it was 2020 when I finally stepped away, and that was probably the hardest part. Even though I'd had coaching and knew about that was first time I had to reinvent my identity completely. There was no business, I wasn't practicing law, I wasn't on telly anymore, and we were in a pandemic, so the whole world was crazy anyway. And I took some time and I got some deep coaching then. And out of that, I have set up a coaching business. And then I remembered how important it was to me to always have the performing side. So I made my way back into television. And so for the last 3 years now, I am back presenting Escape to the Country, which was the show that I presented for over 20 years. And now I'm also bringing my legal expertise into my presenting work as well. So I make guest appearances on Morning Live and have been on Watchdog and other shows. Way back when I was deciding what secondary schools to go to, my parents said, do you want to go to the school I went to, which was quite academic? It was an Ursuline convent, because I was quite academic. Or do you want to go to stage school? Because they knew how much I loved dancing. So this kind of decision has been following me all the way through. And as I've got older, I've realised, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like, who made that rule? It works for some people, but actually what works for me is doing both. And so as long as I can keep creating a world where I get to do both, then I'll just do that. And what I've discovered is it's not that unusual, that there are lots of other people who really want to do this. And the shame is that they spend a lot of time believing that they can't. So they have to choose one or the other, and they always feel like a piece of them is missing. And it's like, well, what if you can just be all of you and do both things? And that's fine. I would advise them what I would advise back then, which is to follow what you love. It sounds cheesy maybe, or trite, and it's not to not do hard things. When you love something, it can be really hard. I worked really hard at Hailbury. I work really hard as a presenter. I have to overcome things that I find difficult. But I love what I do so much that that's fine. That's what I want to do. I stuck with law because I figured out the bits of it that I really loved. If they search for that, just keep cultivating that. If there's a part of your course that really lights your fire, and when you turn up to that lecture, you're excited, then follow that, spend more time in that, see how you can apply that across the rest of the courses, see the rest of it as what's going to support you spending time in that area.